So hi, welcome to End Credit Reviews. On episode of After the Credits on End Credit Reviews, it's just me, Tyler, this time from End Credit Reviews, and this is my review on Frankenstein, or more specifically, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. So originally, this movie at one point was going to be from Universal back in the 2000s, and it was also going to be a trilogy of movies. However, Guillermo del Toro got bogged down with other projects he was attached to and shelved it for the longest time. And then at one point, he was even offered the chance to do a cinematic universe with the Universal monster characters, something that he turned down, but later on would regret, passing the chance to do so. And if you want to read more about the history of the Universal monster movies, I highly recommend checking out my book, 100 Years of Universal Monster Movies, as well as my other book, Disney's Live-Action Movie Bombs, 1979-2019. Both, of course, are available in ebook digital and in print. So with this Frankenstein movie, I have to be honest, this is one of the best Frankenstein movies I've ever seen, or at least adaptations of the Mary Shelley book of the same name. Now, I know I'm personally biased. For me, the first two Frankenstein movies from the 1930s with Boris Karloff will always be my favorite Frankenstein movies. However, this has to be the third best one I've ever seen. One of the strengths of this movie is the cast and the acting. I really liked Oscar Isaac as Victor Frankenstein, someone who, of course, is talented in terms of his knowledge he has with anatomy and trying to bring life to the dead, but we all know that he's a rotten individual who is just corrupted by the power that he has and isn't fit for the responsibility of that. And the irony of that was that his father, or at least his stepdad, was really over strict with him, and he also became overly strict towards his creation as well. And speaking of the stepdad character, it's Charles Dance who plays Leopold Frankenstein. And speaking of Charles Dance and the Universal monster movies, he played the master vampire who gives Vlad Dracula's powers in Dracula Untold. Originally, he was going to be played by Charlie Cox, and I met Charlie Cox at a convention where he autographed a copy of a shooting script for Dracula Untold that I have, and I asked him what happened with that. And he told me that he was replaced by Charles Dance in the reshoots because they wanted an older actor to play his character. And although he spent hours in the makeup chair and he was cut from the movie, he still gets residuals from that movie. I also gotta give props to the actor who plays the creature, who's played by Jacob Eldery. Now, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that name. Now, I heard that he originally was offered the chance to play Superman, but turned it down, and I'm happy he turned it down to be in this movie instead, and he did an excellent job with it. I do like his version of the character, who is sympathetic at times, but yet when he rages, he messes up people. Like, he'll rip people apart or throw them like a rag doll. You don't want to mess with this monster. Or I know he's called the creature, but just out of habit, I call him the monster or the Frankenstein monster. It's just in my nature. I also liked Christoph Waltz and also Mia Goth as their characters in the movie as well, especially with Mia Goth, how the fact that there's obviously, with her chemistry with Oscar Isaac in this movie, how you can tell that they have things in interest, but throughout the story, there's definitely a wedge between them where it could never work out. I also love the visual look of this movie too, in terms of its visual style. Of course, it's a Guillermo del Toro movie, so of course it's going to hit out of the ballpark in terms of its visual aesthetics, but also the sound design is top notch. Every time you hear like a gun go off or any kind of sound effect, it is great. It was just a true cinematic experience, especially the moment when the creature is brought to life with the lightning. It is fantastic. There's also some nice rhyme in this movie where Victor Frankenstein was someone who, growing up, his stepdad was overly strict towards him. He then projected that onto his creature, and that also messed him up too. However, I also noticed that the way that the creature was brought to life was kind of like a crucifixion pose, and something similar you see on Victor's mother's tombstone or grave or whatever it was, where you do see a statue of Jesus in that pose in a way. And also another biblical reference is pretty on the nose, is when there's lightning striking to bring to life the creature, and then Victor basically says it's done, as kind of a reference to when Jesus was on the cross and his last words before he died was, "It is done," or something like that, but you get what I'm talking about. So I guess for problems with this movie, I will say, yeah, the movie is a little bit long at times. You can kind of feel it once in a while. And there's some moments towards the end of the movie in terms of creative decisions. I'm not going to spoil what they are. There's one thing where I'm like, oh, I'm surprised they didn't follow through with that. Or something towards the end where I'm like, well, that was maybe resolved a little bit too quick. And going back a little bit to the visual aesthetic of this movie, I was afraid that because this was a Netflix production, that would look kind of chintzy looking, because Netflix is very restrictive on what cameras they use, because the majority of the people who stream Netflix are using their smartphones or tablets and not like, a TV or even a movie screen. So they overexpose the lighting on those, and that's why they kind of look not so good looking when you see it on a bigger screen. But thankfully, this did not have that. I like how this movie felt like a Guillermo del Toro movie and not like some of the more, visually chintzy movies that Netflix has. They've been expensive movies, of course, but they just have that chintzy aesthetic because of those camera restrictions that they have for most of their movies. And also, before I give my rating, I was also thinking about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein from the 1990s. That was the one where Robert De Niro played the monster. Even though that movie is way over the top in terms of how overly bombastic and operatic that Kenneth Branagh made with that movie because he directed it and he also played Victor Frankenstein in that too, I do have a soft spot for that movie in terms of its artistic merits, especially the soundtrack is very well made and well done and put together. So as for Frankenstein, or at least Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, if you have a chance to see this in theaters, go see it. If you can't and you have to wait till it comes to Netflix pretty soon, then watch it regardless. Even though I did mention how it does have maybe some pacing issues and some decisions towards the end of the movie, which I was maybe not the biggest fan of, I highly recommend checking it out. It is a great movie and one of the best movies you can watch right now, at least new releases to watch around Halloween time. So as for Frankenstein, or Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, I would give it 3.5 stars out of 4. So anyway, this is Tyler from End Credit Reviews. I hope you enjoyed this video of After the Credits on End Credit Reviews, and I hope to make a lot more in the future. Please like and subscribe.